So right at the very start, from that very first phone call, you've made a fundamental error. You've handed over all control. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here. We're not talking little tins and tacks. It's one of the biggest investments you'll ever make, yet we hand over full control over to other people. So what I've tried to do with Haven is to set up a process where the control stays on our side of the table for as long as humanly possible.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show to help you unlock your full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life you really want. Let's get started. Hi freedom fighters. Have you ever done a home renovation or an extension? How did it go? Did everything go to plan? Or perhaps you're considering doing a renovation or extension to your home because you think it's a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get that done and to actually turn an old pig's ear into a silk purse than to go through the pain, heartache and financial stress of turning your world upside down by selling your current property and buying another one with all of the disruption of packing, moving and re-establishing your life into a different place. I mean, how hard can an extension or renovation be? Surely it's not that difficult. Isn't it just a matter of getting some plans done and then getting your builder to make it happen for you? And surely it's not going to cost too much or take too much time. Famous last words. If only it were that simple. Chances are that you've done a home renovation or extension, or you're contemplating doing it at some stage in the future. If you've already done it, I want you to take a second to think back to how you felt before, during, and after the whole experience. Did you start off all excited and full of ideas and enthusiasm about how the renovation or extension was going to transform your world and convert your old, worn out, out of date, tight and inconvenient home into this light, bright haven with all of the mod cons, where you were just going to love spending all of your time and feeling like you're on holidays 24/7? But did your dreams match the reality? Well, probably not. Let me guess. It probably went something a bit like this. You got all your ideas together and you reached out to an architect or a building designer to ensure that what you wanted to do is actually going to be approved. And they then signed you up to an end-to-end agreement that was going to cost you thousands when you actually thought it was only going to cost you a couple of hundred. You then gave them your brief and budget and they worked up your design, which you finally agreed on weeks or sometimes months down the track. Then your designer engages engineers to design and certify the structure, and you're another few $1,000s down the hole. Once this is all done, you get a number of builders to quote on the final drawings, only to find a month or so later that there are tens of thousands of dollars over your original budget. So you go back to your designer, who then charges you more to revise and downgrade the design with many unwanted compromises, and months later again, you're still not able to bring it all within your budget. Meanwhile, months have passed and big dollars have been spent without actual work even being done. So much for a quick and cost-effective extension. And when you finally go back and get more builders' quotes, there's some that won't even bother to give you a price. And of those that do, you find it impossible to compare the massive differences in the cost of one with the other, as they've all made big different allowances in relation to their quotes, and they've got different numbers for provisional sums and prime cost allowances, and for all of the finishing items, which is actually, if you hear PC sums or provisional sums mentioned, this is actually construction code for allowing very little for not much that's bound to cost you a lot more. And the quotes and contracts aren't fixed. So every time there's a change or time extension or delay, you end up paying for it with extra money you probably don't even have. And you learn too late that once you've signed a builder up and executed a building contract, the progress payments are often loaded in the early stages of the build, which means they've got very little financial incentive to actually finish the job, and you've got very limited financial negotiation power to get them to do it. So completion can often end up dragging on forever. In the meantime, every time you make a selection, the builder's hand reaches out for more money and the time frame just keeps blowing out. Months and sometimes a year or more later, your humble home extension is finally complete, having cost you infinitely more than you expected, and the whole experience has been a long, stressful, roller coasting hell ride. And if there's defects or issues incurred once you start living in it, you've got a snowball's hope in hell of getting anyone to come back and fix them. If this is all sounding a bit like the old Tom Hanks movie, The Money Pit, then you're right on the money. What starts as your dream ends up becoming a worst nightmare. Unfortunately, the current construction industry and the building process is extremely one-sided and very inefficient. And unfortunately, these inefficiencies are actually rewarded, meaning that more of your money ends up going to others and less into your important extension. It also means that as owners, you're often extremely vulnerable with little protection, particularly if you have limited knowledge of what you're actually signing up to. Now, while this is unfortunately all a very common experience, it doesn't have to be. As an architect and project manager in my past life, I'm actually a very big fan of the benefits of building, and I know firsthand that you are able to manage and control the time, quality and cost of building renovations and extensions and or new builds and actually achieve great results. It's all about having someone on your side who intimately understands the ins and outs and can manage the paperwork and the entire process from end to end to your benefit, not to everyone else's. And this is where today's very special guest, David Sharp, and his Haven Advocates team comes to your rescue. As the name suggests, David's team become your advocate. They work for you to assist you in scoping, defining, finding, selecting, negotiating, and navigating delivery with all of the right builders and professionals to save you time, money, risk, and of course, stress. This unique service stems from David's 3 decades of experience in the home improvement and construction sector, and he's seen the industry from the inside with all of its fundamental flaws that makes building in Australia expensive, time-consuming, and generally unfair. As your building advocate, David and his team's role is to make the renovation and extension building process fair and efficient and to reduce your vulnerability and risk. He's there to be your voice as the owner and to ensure that your interests and your wallet are put first. So I'm really looking forward to breaking this down and hearing how David and the Haven Advocates team can save you time and money and headache for your next building extension or renovation. So welcome and let's get invested, David.
G'day, Bushy. Thanks for your time, mate. Really appreciate having me on.
Well, as you can see from the intro, I'm very interested in what you bring to the table because it's a real need to really open people's eyes to an opportunity really to have a pleasurable experience and actually to get what they want when they're looking to do their next renovation extension. But mate, before we sort of dive into the details of all that, I'd sort of love for you to give us a bit of a rundown on what you do differently and probably more importantly, mate, why you do what you do.
Yeah, good question. Look, I guess probably the number one fundamental difference is empathy. I've seen it from the inside, as you said in your perfect intro. I've seen it for years and years and years. I've seen the industry not work right. Unfortunately, in our industry, they're just numbers on a page. My background has sort of brought me, I suppose, an understanding of the value of money and how darn hard we all have to work to achieve it. Yeah, as I say, unfortunately, that when they're just numbers on a page, I think there's a lack of understanding in our industry of how hard that person has worked for it. An extra 20,000 here, 30,000 there, 50,000 there. Well, that can actually be another 2-3 years that person needs to stay in the workforce. It can be holidays missed out. It can be a change in education for their kids. They're real numbers and they need to be looked after. But unfortunately, in our industry, 10,000, 30,000, it's almost irrelevant. It's just like there are literally budgets given to say, okay, let's get this extra out of it. And it's simply not fair. So that's probably the number one thing that I've sort of brought to the table is an empathy and an understanding of the reality of the money and a real sort of customer focus to say, hang on, this can be different. So that's probably the number one core element that I'm trying to change. And that's probably what I do bring to the table is that, yeah, that strong sense of empathy and an understanding of how hard we each work for that money.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, mate. Well, I'd love for you to sort of take us through your journey because as I mentioned in the intro, you've sort of seen it from both sides. I'd love for you to sort of break down for us, where you've invested your time, energy and money over the years and why, and how this has actually led you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so look, it all started actually very young. I was still at school. My I just sort of worked part-time for a floor polishing company. So just in the, after school, I'd go and polish floors. And then my wonderful brother-in-law, who's been in my life and still in my life, my darling sister's husband, was good enough and brave enough, I suppose you could say, to lend me money. So I went to him cap in hand, and he loaned me a huge sum of money at the time of $25,000 for me to go out and get my own machinery. He really took a leap of faith in me. He could see who I was as a young man, and did it. So while I was still at school, I had a couple of men working for me. I would finish school and go and do quotes and go and finish off floors and go and fill holes and punch nails down. And so that really sort of got me going on my journey. It gave me confidence. Now, did I get everything right? Absolutely not. Did I make a truckload of money out of that business? Most definitely not. Did I pay my brother-in-law back? Yes, I did. And we're still best mates to this day. But yeah, so that was really the beginning of my journey. That really got me not only the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, but it also showed me that, one, how hard you have to work for your money, but also it got me in that industry and started working. So from there, I started to branch out into others. I even worked in, the plantation shutter industry for a little while, and then really sort of found my focus and found my feet within the building industry. Really focusing, I was never the on-site builder, but what I was is I understood the business of building. So running businesses, and I grew fairly quickly within the industry. I had general manager positions relatively young, probably again, a little bit too young, learned a lot of lessons, burnt some fingers. But yeah, it really developed a broad spectrum of knowledge within the industry, but importantly about how the industry runs. It showed me really easy the flaws. It really did. I could see it very, very, very soon, the flaws within it. And unfortunately, the angle that everything takes, and it's all about making sure that one side of the table is looked after at the expense of the other. So I could see it for years. I often felt myself as you become a bit of a professional bad guy in these roles. You really do. Your job is to, I don't know, for want of a better expression, not take advantage, but, make the most of your situation at the expense of another's. So, so that was really my growth phase, is just understanding how the business went. It started very young and sort of grew myself into some very senior management positions within some very large building companies. So seeing it on a large scale as well as a minute scale.
Yeah, I just want to drill into a couple of things there. You said that you felt you're probably too young for some of the big roles you had. But why do you say that? And then as a flow on from that, you said you started to see the flaws and that there was the angle there that was always about putting your fingers into the payer's purse. Can you sort of expand on both of those a bit for us?
Yeah, I suppose from the too young perspective was, probably not having that empathy, not having that own personal experience of life. I think as we all grow as people, we're the sum of all of our experiences. So I probably didn't have the understanding. I was probably a little bit brash. I was a little, probably possibly overconfident, trying to accelerate my life a little bit quickly. Some mistakes were made. And also, I suppose, a lack of experience, just not having a true understanding of what my role was and the importance of my role within those where I was. So, it did take a little bit of time. There was certainly, as I say, we all make mistakes, and there were some mistakes made. I look back now and think, why did I do it like that? I probably should have done it in a slightly different way. I should have slowed down rather than being so, driven and saying, I want to get to the top as quickly as I possibly can. I probably should have sat back and garnered a bit more experience and knowledge, life experience first. There was probably mistakes made there. And I felt, in terms of that, I felt like I was part of the machine. I was actually driving that conversation where, how can we maximize that? I think as you gain life experience, you realize, hang on, there's got to be a more balanced way to do this, a more nuanced approach. I think when you're young, you're brash, you haven't gone through those experiences. So they sort of lend themselves to both. So that's probably, the best way I could say it is that, gaining that life experience first would have probably been a little bit better and maybe better at my role. Certainly as the years went by and I gained that life experience, particularly having children, I think you realise you interact with your staff so much better. The empathy really does come to the fore, and you start to actually realise, hang on, these are people's livelihoods we're dealing with here, guys. We can still make $1, but we can be better corporate citizens while we're doing it. And, there really is that, if you said to me, if you said, Dave, what's the number one flaw in your industry? It's that people, they don't have that understanding. They just don't have that understanding of that this is people's livelihoods. This is the extra years in the workforce that they don't necessarily have to have. Let's make the process efficient and fair, and then it works. But I say it takes life experience to actually work that out.
Yeah, spot on. So I'd love to sort of understand the bridge to, being a general manager or in similar roles on the construction side of the game, to then flipping the wheel to now becoming the owner's advocate through Haven. Because talk to us through how that came about.
Yeah, well, I suppose, as I said, you become a bit of a professional bad guy. I went through I'll be completely upfront with you and all your listeners. I went through a marriage breakup, and I think that just sort of changes your focus a little bit. I was doing the 70 hours a week, working my absolute butt off for what, and you actually ask yourself that. So I just made that decision as part of the life change that I wanted to make in terms of my own personal growth and development, that I wanted to change it. And I wanted to I could see that need. And I thought, you know what, this is my opportunity to take what I had, the experience that I had, to say, okay, I'm actually going to flip the script here. I'm going to be a changer rather than being in that machine, and actually say, hang on, there is a way we could do it. Believe me, I was getting a lot of doubt from the industry. This will never work. Why are you doing this? You're leaving a high paid job. Why are you doing this? You're crazy. But I thought, you know what? This is the time in my life where I'm actually going to try and make a change to our industry to make it work for everybody. It's about making the entire industry function better from top to bottom. So yes, it's at the benefit of the homeowners, but it also works better for builders, architects, and designers as well. It's not just about the homeowner. Yes, that's my core focus, and that's who I'm employed by, is the homeowner. But my job is to make the entire process more efficient. And as I say, it was my opportunity to sort of step out of that grind, being in the machine, to say, okay, there has to be a better way. There really has to be a better way. And, I took it upon myself to say, look, this is how I'm going to do it. I could see clear as the nose on my face what was wrong and where it needed to go. I just needed to do it. So that was where that sort of big leap of faith went. And, I certainly suffered financially for a period of time, but, as they say, everything that, is worth doing is worth sacrificing for. So I took that sacrifice on board, and really put my head down and thought, no, I'm going to make this work. And again, like with you don't get it right the first time. There's tweaks, there's changes, there's ways you go about it. But certainly over the years that Haven's been running, it's now been running since 2018. I've been able to sort of really make that process really refined to the point where people within the industry are now coming back to me saying, thank goodness you did this, Dave. This is actually really needed. So, all things considered, it was well worth that sacrifice and that leap, just to, as I say, step myself out of that, in that grind, 70 hours a week, being the bad guy, to now being the, and it's also about me also being around for my two young daughters. I'm a single dad. I'm full-time with my children. I have them 100% of the time due to various reasons. But to give myself, from a personal perspective, give myself that flexibility so I can work from a home rather than being out of the home, 70 hours a week. I'm now at home a lot of the time. Yeah, I've got to tell them to go downstairs and be quiet and things like that. But, I'm at least here. Nothing gives me more joy than going and picking them up from school, being able to be, there when they've got their music lessons and things like that, and being able to be there for the performances and the sports events and things like that. So from a personal perspective, it was a great choice. And an industry perspective, I think it's definitely, been proven to be the right thing to do.
Yeah, I love it. So is the divorce been the sort of the tipping point and your most challenging event in your life that's brought about those changes, or are there other things there that are worth talking about as well?
Yeah, look, I certainly wanted to do it prior to that. I knew, that it needed to happen, and I knew I wanted to do it. That was certainly the catalyst to say, now's the time to do it, certainly. So yes, it was rather than being the reason, I suppose it was as much of an opportunity. It returned my, as with many divorces, you have to sell property. So it turned it into a cash settlement. I wanted to move I was in Melbourne at the time, wanted to move back to Sydney for the benefit of my children. Be closer to other family and the like. So that made sense. I didn't have then the money to say, okay, I can jump straight back into the property market in Sydney, as obviously assets get diluted. So that was, So yes, it wasn't the reason, but it was the catalyst in terms of the timing. I suppose, and my mum is a big driver of who I am as a person. She's a migrant, single mother, worked her absolute butt off, did the 2 jobs, did everything to provide for me and my sister. So if anything, that's probably the life experience that has given me that empathy that we talk about, that drive, that want for better, that understanding of the value of money, seeing how hard mum had to work. She was a secretary for the local council, and then she would go work, waitressing at night, and she would, she was a kitchen hand for a period of times just to put enough money on the table for me and my sister. She also, one of the life lessons she gave to me early on when, young teenagers, you're going off the rails, and part of why I started my business so early is she said, if, you're never going to be on the dole, son. You're never going to do it. I didn't do it. I never put my hand out. I always worked my tail off, and you're always going to do the same. So, the timing was driven by the divorce, but I suppose the life lessons that I got from my mum were probably the main reason why I am where I am now in terms of who I am as a man, but also who I am in terms of my business life and the ability to sort of empathize with the people that I work with, that customer focus, because I do truly understand the value of money and how darn hard we all have to work for it.
Yeah, I love it, mate. I'd love for you to sort of give us a few thoughts on, in addition to investing in your career, which you're obviously very ambitious and wanting to climb the tree, which, many young blokes do exactly the same. Outside of the work environment, were you investing in anything else? And, I'm talking here property, shares, equities, you name it. I'd love for you to sort of talk to us about, what you invested in, when and why. And what's been your investment strategy, and then we'll flip into talking about what the future looks like and where to from here. But just from your investment journey so far, what does that look like?
Yeah, so look, early on it was all about getting that primary home somewhere for my now ex-wife and I to live. That was it. So it was scrimp and save and save and save. I wasn't an active investor as early on. I really wasn't. It was certainly later on in life that, look, I've developed a real passion for precious metals. That's always been understanding that, and some of the books that I've read have really led me to that, and sort of had that understanding between the difference between money and currency. That's always been a big part of my sort of thinking. I believe it's a hard asset. It was, particularly after the divorce, it was a hard asset I could get into without needing the $1 million to buy a 1-bedroom unit in Sydney. So that was a lot of it. I have invested in equities. That was a big passion. I even had a period of time when I was first starting the business, one of the ways that I would sort of keep my mind active and keep things going, I would set the alarm and get up in the middle of the night and invest on the NASDAQ and do a bit of trading and things like that. So I developed a real passion for it. It was I absolutely love it, and still to this day. I can, at any one time, I've got a chart open on one screen. So I've got a real passion about it. Made some good choices and bad choices, as we all have. You certainly don't get them all right in that aspect. But that's always been a big part of it. But my investment has been, so I invest quite heavily in miners. So I like mining stocks. But everything. So look, I made the mistake of selling Afterpay shares at $8, and they went to $120 because I was worried about the Royal Commission and things like that. So, so there's been many branches, but yes, definitely equities, precious metals. That's certainly been my main focus in terms of my investment strategy, with a goal, though, I'll be honest with you, to getting back into that property market so I can create that stability, that home environment for my daughters. That's really the end goal. That everything else is a means to get to that again. So certainly.
Yeah, I love it. Very similarly, mate. I shared with you in the green room. I had a car crash of a divorce when I was 33, and like you, I just didn't have anything left. It was ground zero for me at that stage, and I actually day traded I did CFDs at that stage to actually get enough deposit to get into property, because I just didn't have the wherewithal to do anything else at that point in time. So it makes absolutely perfect sense. I'd like to sort of jump into the future a bit now and get you to paint us a picture of what your ideal life does look like, and what's your investment strategy moving forward in terms of what you'll invest in, why, to achieve whatever that life vision is and the ideal lifestyle that you've got in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's very clear goals in terms of what I need in terms of, deposits. I'm getting there, working my way forward. Again, keeping that sort of share portfolio open and just chipping away slowly. Obviously, the core element of my business is also, obviously we all do it for a reason. To try and build that equity back, so I can, as I say, get back into that property market. I want my two young daughters to have that stable home. I really do. I don't want to be moving around. I don't want that vulnerability. So that really is the core goal. Then from there moving forward would be to then to hopefully be able to use that equity to go into property investment further. I'm a strong believer in property investment. I really am. Everything else I believe for me, how I see it personally, is a means to getting to that. I very much am a believer in hard assets. I think especially in areas like Sydney, Melbourne, right across the country, I just think it's tangible, it's stable. If I can then get to a point where I'm growing to a point where I can, say to my daughters, well, okay, I've given you guys that leg up, so they don't have to scrimp and save, so they're not paying in the rental wheel. If I can do whatever I can to make their journey that little bit easier, then that's absolutely the goal. So it's really just about getting that equity so I can get to a point where I'm comfortable with the mortgage that I would be presented with, to live in the area that I want to keep my girls at the school that they are now, have enough for their education as well, which I hugely value, making sure that I can do that. So that's really the goal at the moment. It's build up that cash sum, in many different ways, to get to that point where I can then, take on that mortgage and then, whittle that down to a point where there's enough equity to then span out into further property investment. That's how I see the future laying out.
Yeah,
for
love
sure.
it, mate. Love it. So if you were to sort of define your version of sustainable success, what's it look like for you?
Look, it's largely about freedom. It really is about that freedom to make sure I've got that time. And I keep harping back to my daughters, but that's why we all do it. So I can maintain that time. That's what I see as sustainable success. So I'm doing something that I love, and I genuinely love what I do. I really do. I wake up every day knowing that I'm achieving for my clients. I put my head on the pillow every night knowing that they are better off with me in their lives than without. Yeah. So that's definitely what I see as sustainable success, maintaining a business that I truly enjoy, that I'm very passionate about, but also having that flexibility and time with my girls. So I'm not an absent father that, so many of us are forced to be. None of us do that by choice. We do it because we have to. That no father or mother walks away and leaves, is away for that 70 hours a day by choice. We do it because we have to. So that's what I see as sustainable success, where I can create a stable environment for my two daughters, but also be there whenever they need me, whenever they're putting their hand up saying, Dad, can you help? I'm actually able to do it. So that's definitely what I define as sustainable success, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it's sort of reflecting on that. If you were starting out again, David, what would you invest in differently, if anything?
Look, again, I suppose not. I wouldn't do, to be honest with you, I wouldn't do a lot different. I would certainly invest in business and time. I think you can, if you can be at a point where you're not just leasing your hours, not just leasing your time for money in return. I think that's always been something that I learned very, very early in the piece. As I say, I was at school getting an education, and I had other people working I was leasing their time. And that was when the sort of light bulb moment happened. Hang on, I can actually do this without having to just purely lease my time. That's certainly, so invest certainly in education and into business, most definitely, making yourself that better person. In terms of, an investment strategy, as I say, as I said, I'm a strong believer in property. So find that means to get into that property market. So I probably would have jumped into the property market a little bit sooner. We can always look back and think, wow, how cheap was it then? Oh my goodness. But, so I would certainly try to, and that's certainly the education I'm trying to give my girls is, let's do what we can to try and get you onto that ladder as soon as possible, because as much as we see property going like this, and you can hear all the doom and gloom stories, this overvalued market, whatever it is, we all know the direction it heads, and it's just that stability. It's a core place, it's roots in the ground. So that's certainly what I would do differently. I'd probably try and get in a bit sooner. That would be my goal. I probably did leave it a bit too long. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's never too late to start, but always too late to wait, mate. You always say that. But
good point. I like that.
Yeah, if you look back on what you've invested in over the years, I'm not talking about equity, shares, property. I'm just talking about generally. What's been your best and worst investment, and what have you learned from each of those?
Look, I did do very well in terms of my property when I bought the home, did the thing, hang on to 10 years, double it. That certainly works. So that's definitely it. Definitely my best investment is into myself. And I think if there's one thing that I could, would pass on to anybody is invest in yourself first and foremost, so you can then grow. That's sustainable. That is long term. You can, there's bad equities that I bought. There's good equities that I bought. There's some that, buy a share for 4 cents, it turns into $4. You think you're the greatest thing on earth. You think you're a master. But still the greatest investment is in your time, in your own education. Now that's not necessarily, I didn't go to university. I worked and worked and worked. I worked my way up due to my experience. That's how I did it, and by my drive. That was what got me through. So I think certainly investing in yourself is the absolute number one strategy. I think, everything else will take care of itself. If you invest in yourself, that creates that freedom, that time to then keep the eyes up and actually look around and see what's there. If you're just in focusing on other things and you're focusing on a particular arbitrary number to say, I've got to get to this, you'll actually lose focus of what's important,
Yeah, extremely well said, mate. I want to sort of segue now into the topic that's closest to your heart, and the thing that's really starting to shake up and wake up people to how the construction side of the game should be done for everyone's benefit. And that's to talk about Haven Advocates. I want to sort of set the scene for that, though, by getting you to sort of unpack what common mistakes and traps you see homeowners making when it comes to renovating or extending their homes. Yeah,
look, I don't even know if I'd put it as mistakes. There's little option. There really is. There's only very sort of limited pathways that can go. I think you can probably see the sign in behind me. It's where do you start? That's the biggest mistake. People actually make the mistake when they start. They don't know where to go. And I ask that question of, where do you go? What do you do? Who do you actually start with? You got the choice. Do you go to a builder at the start? So our industry is full of full service builders, and they have a place. They're great. You go there, they get their architect to draw up some plans. They get their engineer, their people. They're paying a salesman a rate to manage your process, get you approved. But it's all looked after them. You've handed over control. You'll often find on page 7 of the terms and conditions, you actually don't even own those plans. So right at the very start, from that very first phone call, you've made a fundamental error. You've handed over all control. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here. We're not talking little tins and tacks. It's one of the biggest investments you'll ever make, yet we hand over full control over to other people. The other mistake that people make is they do the right thing. They go talk to an architect. Architects have very little, they're great, they're fantastic at what they do, but they have very little understanding of cost, as I'm sure you know as well as anybody.
You can say what you like about architects, mate. It's okay. I used to be one. I'm not attached to that anymore, so go for broke.
So they're either numbers on a page or lines on a page, and that's really all it is. Again, they often have very little understanding of actually what things actually cost to build, what's actually important. And, I've seen it 1,000 times where once you've seen $1 million design, when you've only got $600,000, you all of a sudden see a $600,000 design. It's awful. You don't like it. You don't want it. You don't want anything to do with it. You've seen the light. You've seen it now. So, that's probably the mistake is you're actually often committing, particularly with the first option, when you go to the full service builder route, you're committing to who you're going to buy off before you know how much it's going to cost. Now, that's a very vulnerable position. I think I said to you earlier, you wouldn't buy a fridge like that. You wouldn't go to Harvey Norman and say, all right, this is the fridge I want. And then they say, okay, take it home for 6 months, use it. You can't bring it back, but then we'll ring you in 6 months and tell you how much it's going to cost. They can tell you whatever it is, and we're talking a fridge. We wouldn't do it that way, but yet for some reason with building, we're actually expected to do that. We jump in, we commit, then way down the pipe, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 into the process. We then find out what it's going to cost. It's all too late then. Those plans are unique. They can't just be shifted. So what I've tried to do with Haven is to set up a process where the control stays on our side of the table for as long as humanly possible. We drive that process. So we will engage an architect that ensure that, and I say we, when I'm saying we, I'm talking me and my customers and the homeowners, and that's how I approach it. It's we're a team. Okay, we're on one side of the table and everybody else is on the other side of the table. So my role is to work with that homeowner. We engage an architect that we're engaging, no margins, any bills will be sent. So the architect's bill is in the homeowner's name. The engineer's bill is in the homeowner's name. So we start that process slowly. So we start with initial conceptual designs. We'll start that process. Then as early in the piece as possible, I'll put a cost, I'll engage a QS and we'll actually cost those plans really, really early. At concept stage, those plans are cheap and easy to manipulate. You've only spent maybe $3,000 or $4,000 getting to that point, right? You go, you know what, Dave, I really like them, but let's see how much it really, really costs. Then we sit down, we go, okay, we're a bit over budget. They're easy to manipulate at that point. They're conceptual. We haven't gone to the technical side of things yet. Conceptual designs show you as the homeowner more than a technical drawing. The technical drawing just has a lot of extra lines that educate everybody else, not you, right? So they're all scaled. You can see it's enough for me to put a price to. If we look at it and say, you know what, I'm comfortable, we're comfortable with what we genuinely think that's going to cost, then and only then do we go to council or go to the certifier and start actually spending true money. But importantly as well, as you start spending this money, so the engineer might only cost $3,000, but you're seeing a bill via your builder that's $6,000. You don't know that the engineer only costs $3,000. Under my process, we're controlling that. So the bills come to the homeowner, direct to the homeowner. I manage the process, but they're in the owner's name. So they can see full transparency. It's all laid out in front of them, just reducing that vulnerability. My process as well, I want to get everything watertight before we go and engage with a builder. Take out the, I'm sorry, I didn't think that was included. I'm talking a 30-page specification. I'm talking every I dot, everything costed. We define, so there will be some provisional sums within every building contract because they're design choices that the owner will still want to, you haven't settled on your kitchen exactly yet, or you haven't settled on all those finer little elements. So we'll put a provisional sum into it, but they're all apples for apples. So when you're going to market, each quote is really easy to compare. Yeah. We know, okay, every builder is allowing the same amount for those very few, there's not many, but for the very few bits that there are, but everything. So when they come back and say, I didn't think the niche in that third bathroom, the little wall recess, I didn't think it was included. Well, hang on, it's there. It's on page 13. It's in the specification. That specification is referenced in the building contract. So we've taken out that ambiguity. We've taken out the, oh, sorry, I didn't think it was included. Now, you know, that helps the builder as well. It takes, the builders don't want those tough conversations. They don't want to have to go to a homeowner and say, sorry, I didn't think it was included. Some builders have included it, some builders haven't. Again, how do you compare? So we try to make the playing field equal, but importantly, the number one fundamental thing is we try to keep control on our side of the table for as long as possible. Then we get the builder to build. That's his job. Just get him to build. We'll manage it. We'll have that process. Even when we're on site with the builders, though, variations. We all hate that word. Oh, variations. You as a homeowner, you get called. Oh, I'm sorry. There's this bearer that's gone, and it's going to cost $14,000. But how are you expected to know? There's no layer of accountability there as well. That's vulnerability. So part of my process is they call me. Right, they call someone who's been in the industry for a long time that has all the costings, and I say to them, well, hang on, mate, this is it's $1,000 worth of timber and it's half a day's labour for a chippy. How on earth have you come up with that number? That call happens once; it doesn't happen twice, right? They don't try that again, right? So it's just reducing that vulnerability. I want my clients to be sitting at home or at work, earning the money to pay for it, and not have to second guess every call that they get. I don't want them to have to get the calls. I'm answering those questions. Again, making the process more efficient for not only the homeowner, but for the builder. He's got that central point of contact. The engineer has a central point of contact. The architect, they say, Dave, can you coordinate this for us? No problems. That's my job. That's what I'll do. So it's just about creating the efficiencies, making the process fair, and reducing that vulnerability. That's the number one thing for sure.
Yeah, if I was sort of listening to what you're talking about there, the two words that stick in my head are certainty. So there's no grayness for anyone in the process, and the control in the right place. Because as you've well said, as soon as you're effectively handing the keys over to the builder and the builder's driving everything else, you're a pimple on the pumpkin when it comes to having any say pretty much on what's going on. If it's the old story. If it's not written down, then it didn't happen pretty much to some degree.
Correct.
And if you've got nothing to refer back to, then it's he said, she said, and we know who wins in that situation.
That's right. And relationships break down, and that's part of it as well. So I become a bit of a relationship manager between that buffer between the homeowner. I say to my owners all the time that I want you to get to the end and you and your builder still actually get along. So someone's got to go in there and puff their chest out and be the bad cop. That's my role. I'll do that. I'll go in there and have those tough conversations with the builder. You don't worry about it. I don't expect you to go up there and be baffled with bull dust. I can actually go there and step forward and say, from a position of authority, with the want of better expression, I can actually go there and say, okay, no, this is how it needs to be, and this is why. And then you have the conversations. But look, to be fair, I've never had a builder not come back and ask me for more work. They want my work as well. They actually go, you know what, Dave, you make I probably didn't make as much money. I probably was, a little bit more accountable, but they enjoy the process. They appreciate the certainty, the lack of ambiguity as well, the lack of those tough conversations. I'm making the process more efficient for them as well. So they come back and go, Dave, have you got any more work? And I say, yeah. You're going to have to really make sure you look after my clients on price, on service, on everything that you do, and then we can actually start moving forward on the next job. But again, it's that layer of accountability. As a homeowner, you're probably only ever going to do it once.
Yeah.
And a builder knows that. They don't need to impress you. They can get towards the end of the job, and it can be all about margin and making sure their income's coming. But with me they're trying to impress me. They're going, oh, we probably won't do that because I actually want another job. I want to get another bit of work out of him. So, and just to disclose, I take no commissions off any builders, any architects, any engineers. I'm employed by the homeowner. If a builder comes to me and says, Dave, I'll give you 10 grand. Okay, great. You can knock 12 grand off the bill because you're going to pay me 10 grand. You're going to put a margin on it as well. So 12 grand off the bill. Thank you very much. That's great. That's a win. So, again, it's about transparency, but it's all, it just makes that process more efficient, as you say, removes that control, puts the control back on the right side of the table.
Yeah, and that certainty is there for both sides to see. That's the key, sort of removing grayness from the whole equation. It sort of sounds a little bit like, if I'm trying to put this in a format that people could get their heads around, it almost sounds like you're the orchestra. You help the owner write the symphony, and then you introduce the right instrument at the right time, and then not only coordinate their input, but control their input and make sure that what they're doing is actually in the best interest of the owner.
Exactly right.
So
exactly right. Yeah.
No, it sounds perfect, mate. You've sort of given us a really good picture on what Haven Advocates do. Is there anything that you don't do in the scope of this whole exercise that owners need to be aware of?
Look, from the owner's perspective, look, as I say, I'm not the builder, so I'm not the guy that's going to be sitting there pointing at their carpenter to say, go and do this. We ensure that we get the right builders in place to do that day-to-day construction management. But from the homeowner's perspective, I really do drive the bus. I genuinely do. They genuinely can sit back and just know their interests are being looked after, and that dollars are trying to be saved at every point in time that we can. Those efficiencies are created. So from the homeowner's perspective, I'm an arm of them. So I do everything that they require from me to do that. So even down to, if the unthinkable happens and we need legal representation, I can manage that side of things. I can coordinate with council, certifiers, everybody throughout the process. So aside from doing the actual building, from the homeowner's perspective, I genuinely do take care of everything. They've just got to go to work to pay the bills. That's what they've got to do. They're going to pay for it. That's the one thing I can't do. That's again, it allows them just to focus on that. It's, as I said earlier, we all work bloody hard for our money. So just having, making sure that most of that money is actually going into that nice kitchen, into those better quality windows, into that flooring, whatever it should be, that it's not being thrown up against the wall on things that they'll never see. One of the great examples I give was a project I was working on in Ashfield, and there was 2 street accesses. So there was one where the water assets were owned by Sydney Water on one side, water assets were owned by Inner West Council on the other, Inner West Council in Sydney. Yeah. Now, they both have different rules. So there was dual access. So we worked out that if we pumped the water one way, there was a set of rules that were going to cost my client about $35,000 more than if we pumped the other way. Now, Sydney Water wanted us to go that way, but I got the bit between my teeth and I said, no. There's got to be a way we can make this work for the betterment of my clients. Now, it took a lot of phone calls. It took a lot of time, meetings with council, meetings with Sydney Water, working with a water services coordinator, hydraulic engineers and the like, but I got there. I was able to ring my client and say, guess what? We don't need that on-site detention tank, which is a giant concrete underground swimming pool. We didn't need it. So I was able to say to them, look, I saved you 35 grand. Now, it took me time. The flaw in our industry is that no one's ever going to make those calls because they're going to make 20% on that $35,000 you've just spent. So there's no incentive to try and save that client that money. There's none. They actually get rewarded for not making those 15 phone calls and having those meetings and driving, across the other side of Sydney to make it happen. But for me, my role and what I want referrals, of course, and I want my clients to be happy. I want to be that professional good guy. So I was able to ring my clients and say, hey, Joanne, I just saved you this money and this is where we're at, and that's the fun. Again, inefficiencies are rewarded. Whereas, for myself, it was really a case of, getting the bit between my teeth so I could have that great moment where, fist clenched going, I bloody did it, I did it. I saved you that money,
Right, because the other good thing here is that the owner's actually got a sounding board that they can freely talk to about things without fear or favour. And I guess as well, David, if the owner's got false expectations as well, you can quietly qualify them and get their head in the right place.
Definitely, but they can trust what I'm saying. They know that I'm not doing it for any vested interest because my interests are their interest. So there are times I don't always agree with what my owner says. And sometimes I'll have to say, what, the builder's right. He's actually right. This actually does have to happen. And that is the true cost. But at least I know that my owners can sit back and go, well, that's just the way it is. Not everything's perfect, but at least we know that Dave's tried to get it the right way, but this is the outcome and this is actually the best possible outcome for me. Save that second guessing. It was one of my very first clients. It was one of the things that he said, and it's really always rung true, is he go, I don't have to second guess every phone call. I don't have to second guess every piece of information because I trust you, Dave. I know you've got my interests at heart, and I genuinely do, because that's my business. Without that core element, my business is nothing. It doesn't actually exist. I'm just one of the rest of them. I'm just putting people on treadmills. I'm just the one, trying to maximize that, but I'm not incentivized by that. I start off with a fixed price at the start. The more money my clients spend, that's up to them. I'm not incentivized in any way for them to spend any more money. We define a fixed agreement right at the very start of the process in terms of the cost for my services. I can absolutely rest my head on the pillow every night knowing I save my clients multitudes more than I charge them. I absolutely know that, and again, I can safely say that. But yeah, they don't have to second guess because I'm not incentivized by inefficiencies. I'm incentivized by being able to say, and they get to the end of it and go, wow, that process was amazing, Dave. Any clients that want to ring me, let them ring me. Any prospective clients, and again, that's what I'm incentivized by. And also, I've just told every single friend I have that if they're building, they have to use you, and that happens. I'll be honest with you, 100% of the time, I have a 0% fail rate in terms of getting to the end of the project, and the client says, "I can't believe that anyone would do it on their own."
Yeah. Because what I love about it, you understand what everyone's talking about. You know the lingo, you know the pitfalls, you know who to talk to about what questions to ask and what the answers mean. Whereas you're almost like putting a smart headset on someone's virtual glasses, and suddenly you're seeing the world the way it is, not the way they think it is. And you're eliminating that whole, I don't know what I don't know thing. Which is where people are extremely vulnerable in that situation. So
absolutely.
I love the way you're adding the smarts to the owner side of the equation on that. Just a little bit more so that, because there'll be a lot of listeners going, gee, this sounds really good. It's an insurance policy really to make sure I'm get what I want to get. You touched on how you get paid. Can you give us a little bit more shape around that so that people understand where that fits?
Yeah, so I work off essentially a percentage of my clients' budgets. So we define that, and again, it makes me accountable to a budget. So again, unlike everybody else, that 600 grand turns into $1 million, and each job is different based on workload, where the client's at in terms of their process. But yeah, so I work off a percentage of it. Now, I'll be honest with you, I base that percentage largely on what I used to pay my sales guys and my project coordinators within these full service building companies that I was working for. So, but they get that's a cost of sale to the builder, right? So they're paying someone to coordinate, and then a margin gets applied. So someone has to do what I do, but it's always done from the builder's perspective. These things don't just get approved on their own. They don't get managed on their own. Somebody is doing it. You just don't know how much it's costing you. Under my process, it's very laid out right at the start of it. It's pegged against your budget. So there's a particular percentage that will apply, often far less than an architect will, and the sales consultants are paid with margins and things like that. So it's very transparent, very upfront, and fixed right at the start of the project. I also stage it throughout the build as well. So I create what I call off ramps throughout. Life can change, Bushy, as you know. Things can change. Things can turn, and all of a sudden the bank's not going to lend you the money they originally did. So I don't want my people on a treadmill. I want to work with you and create off ramps. So my fees are very much staged throughout the program to say, okay, here's our pause. Are we right to go to the next one? Is the budget still working? Is the finance still working? Is the design still working? Are all these elements still working? Did we get council approval in line with your original expectations? I like to create those off ramps. I'm not about trapping people. That's what I'm trying to change. Yeah. So it's really just a case of having a systematic process as we work through. Once I call the first stage explore. So we just explore, what are we going to do? What's it going to cost? Then we move through to either council or private certifier approval, and then tendering, then final certification. Then while we're on site, then occupation certificate. So as I say, I create those off ramps. Sometimes it's just a pause. Sometimes people just need to go, Dave, I got to pause for a bit. I got to get my ducks in line. There you go. There's a clear break for you to say, okay, we can pause now. So that's how I've structured it. So in a way that is very much commensurate with what you're going to be paying anyway, but rather than paying that, a margin applied, I've lined it up with, okay, yes, you're still paying that, but it's very transparent, and my job is to save you far over that. And look, honestly, if I can, even just when it comes to negotiations with a builder, with that incentive of I have more work, but avoiding all those margins, just avoid. I often can safely say that I've saved my clients well over my fees before a nail hits a piece of timber. Yeah, really have, before any of the other stuff comes out into the wash, all the certainty and everything that's created just by the margins up front. When you're paying true cost for the architect, true cost for the engineer, true cost for the certified, there's none of these things added, and there's also not margins added and payment added to pay for somebody else to do what I'm doing. So that's, again, that's the safety that we can create. So that's really how I like to structure it. So it's very transparent and upfront, and very much broken up throughout the process.
Yeah, I love it. So you can sort of do it in chunks depending on where you're at and what's happening. You're not locked in from the whole thing from the get-go. No, I love the flexibility of what you're suggesting there. So I know this is going to be of interest, because there wouldn't be a person listening that isn't going to be doing renovation, extension, or build at some point in time. So in that context then, and you mentioned this right at the start, where do we need to start, and what steps should we be taking then in relation to what you're doing?
Yeah, look, the sooner you can contact myself in your journey, the better. The more benefit I can bring, the sooner I'm involved. As I said right at the very start of this conversation, and as the sign says, it's where you start that often sets that journey. So by starting in the wrong spot, you're often trapped very, very, very early in the piece. So that's not to say that I can't aid you further down the pipe. If any of your listeners are further down the pipe, they've done the DA or they're locked in with somebody, that I can still help, but the sooner I'm involved, the better. So I always tell my clients, if at the light bulb moment, that's when we can get. So the process for me really starts with an initial consultation that comes cost free. To have that realistic budget discussion. I'll be honest with you, I probably go about 30% of people I go to see, I say, guys, don't start. Because if that's your budget and that's your brief, there's a gap. We either need more money, which, again, we've all got finite amounts of money, but we also have a finite need. So if you need an extra 3 bedrooms to make your family work, but you've only got X dollars and it's going to cost X plus a lot, don't start. There comes a time where you've got to start spending money. I'd rather say to people, stop, don't invest, don't do it now. I don't want people on that treadmill. Too often you'll get, let's go. Yeah, your budget's that. Full knowledge that it's going to cost you way more, but they just anticipate that you're going to go back to the bank and borrow more money. Those times are changing. That's not so easy now. So start with that conversation early, have a realistic budget discussion. Guess what? This is going to cost you 500K, and I'm just throwing numbers here. This is going to cost 500K for what you're saying. Well, but Dave, I've only got 300. Don't start. There comes a time when you have to start spending money. I'd rather cut you off. Now I'll give you an honest upfront appraisal at the very start. If you say, look, I've got 500, I'm like, I'll be honest, I'll say we're tight. There's going to have to be some real nuance, some real process. We're going to have to really keep our pencil sharp, but I'm comfortable to move forward. And then we can sit down together and say, okay, this is how we're going to go, and this is how we're going to move forward. So yeah, the earlier they can start that conversation, the better. Again, don't commit to who. The one advice is, don't commit to who you're going to buy off before you know how much it costs. There's only one really, that's hard to do. That is very hard to do without having someone like myself on board. So get in as early as you can. Get that information, get the knowledge, empower yourself with that knowledge as early as possible, and keep control on your side of the table for as long as possible. There's even people that, are doing minor renovations that may not need certification and council approval and architects. So again, my advice to those people is compartmentalize, have a series of buckets. There's a level of approval needed for each thing. So just retiling a bathroom, you don't need approval. You can just get it done. So put that into that bucket. Extending needs to go into another bucket. Knocking down a tree is another bucket. Let's get the buckets, and again, control what you can control and keep as much of that power on your side. So then you might only be going to a builder for one small part. You can manage those little bits on your own. The painting, the new window there that's going to be like for like, all those sorts of things, you can control that. Keep those buckets separate, and then say, okay, I'm only dealing with this one little bucket now. It's not this whole elaborate project. If you go to a builder with the whole elaborate project, you're going to pay for that whole elaborate project, and it just adds up. It makes the job more complex and more difficult for a builder. If you can go there with just that one little bucket and say, hey, I just need that small wall knocked out, oh, that's easy. We can do that. And it keeps the contract price down, so fees are less, all those sorts of things. So, I live by a philosophy, it costs me nothing to take a phone call, right? So I would tell countless people when I'm dealing with them, just give me a call. Ask me, what do you think, Dave? Do you think can I go about it this way? What's your advice? I'm in a fortunate position where I'm not begging for customers. I can just sit down and have those honest conversations. Very much, I'm a professional good guy. So I can just have those conversations and say, hey, this is the way I think we can approach it. You actually might not need me. If you just want to give me a call every month and keep me abreast of what you're doing, and I'll give you an updated advice, we can work it that way. It's just but yeah, get in as early as you can, and, just control what you can control.
Yeah, I love it. That control word again is a key one there, mate. Really love what you're doing, and I know you're going to smash the industry with what you're doing here, because once people cotton on to, it's like taking the shades off and starting to re-look at the whole exercise from a different perspective. Yeah. There's no doubt that's going to go from strength to strength. But mate, I want to shift now into what I affectionately refer to as the bushfire lightning round, or the ambush round, where I give you the blindfold and cigarette and ask you the fast 4 questions that everyone asks on a podcast. And the first of those, David, is what's your favourite quote and why?
Look, I think it's an Albert Einstein quote. It's like life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving, right? And that's honestly how I think. It's a philosophy I've always done. Even before I sort of heard that quote, I've always sort of lived by that. It's just keep moving forward. That's it. That's the only way to keep your balance. If you slow down too much, you'll lose folk. And so just, you don't want to be pedaling at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but you've got to keep moving forward. Now, whether that's in your investment profile, whatever that should be, whether it be, just your general day-to-day life, I think your own set. And that's really what that quote does for me, is that it reflects on my own self-improvement as a human being, as a business operator, as a father, all those things. If I'm not moving forward, I'm going to lose my balance, and I'm going to lose focus of what's really important. So that's probably the number one sort of quote that I've always sort of just had, ticking away at the back of my head. Just keep moving forward, Dave. Sometimes things are hard. Sometimes it's an uphill ride, but just keep moving forward, and it will eventually take care of itself.
I love it. I want to switch into the literary perspective for a minute. What's the top book that you recommend we read, and why?
Look, I suppose going back to my investment profile, and I have a genuine love for precious metals. There's a guy, he's some people find him controversial, but a guy by the name of Mike Maloney, who I think has a really great understanding of, you don't have to agree with everything he says, but I think it's that understanding of money versus currency. I think it's something we don't teach financial literacy enough to our children. We don't teach them that we spend decades working for this holy thing called money. We don't actually have an understanding of the policies made by governments, monetary policy versus, all these policies that actually dictate the value of that money. So that's a really powerful thing. And I try to get anyone new sort of stepping into whether it be the business world or into the investment world, is try and read things like that. Try and get an understanding of what is money versus currency, because because they are very different things. They truly are two different things. And that's what I think Mark articulates it in a very simple way. There's even videos that you can watch of his that, sort of show that. And again, it goes back to a bit with your philosophies around property as well, is that true value of a hard asset as well. I think that's a really important thing. So I really love it. He's done another one recently that I've read. I think it's called The Gold Rush. There's another one with gold and silver investing. I think they're just really powerful books in terms of teaching the fundamentals to how the monetary system actually works.
Yeah, love it. I want to sort of swing into the investment arena again and get your thoughts on what's the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received.
Oh, look, I suppose particularly with equities, there was this sort of piece of advice: is it's not a loss until you sell. Right. And that was something that okay. So what you do is you tend to hang on to your equities for too long, and it's a leaking ship, and you can see it's going down, 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 down. So, the best bit of advice I've probably learned from equity trading perspective is take the profits, but also minimize your losses. So from that perspective, that's definitely it, without a doubt, is, don't become too wedded to these things. You can fall in love with them and you go, oh, it's all right. It'll come good. But, and that idea that it's not a loss until you sell is utter garbage. The loss just becomes bigger when you sell if it's not the right equity to be in. So in terms of an investment from a trading perspective or an equity investment, that was absolutely number one for sure.
I think it's applicable right across the board, because there's a cost benefit analysis in what you're talking about. If you're seeing a slow death of something rather than taking on and putting into something that's going to make you money, then you're losing on both ends of the equation.
That's right.
I love it. I want to turn to sort of disciplines or rituals or happy habits that you have that you employ that you think has contributed most to your success, David.
Look, I think probably one of the best ones, and I don't know, I wouldn't say it's contributed to my success, but it helps me with my life in general. And it might seem really simple, but every night before I go to bed, I write a to-do list. I used to be a terrible sleeper. I would churn and churn and churn. I'd lie awake at night and I'm running these lists through my head. So I have a routine now where I come into my office at, whatever time that should be. And I'll sit down and I'll write a to-do list. It helps me sleep better, but it also helps me start the following day a lot better, a lot clearer. So I find I'm just jumping into my day. And that small change in my daily habit has had an exponential benefit to me in many aspects: my mental health, my sleep patterns, as I say, my ability to kickstart my following day. So that's an advice I give to every young guy that I'm, or young lady that I'm working with, that I say, just try that, give it a try and see what it does for you, because the more you care, the more you think. So if you're actually thinking and you're just running these through, there are people that have that ability just to switch off when they go to bed. I'm not one of those people. I'm not fortunate enough. I'm a thinker, and I'm constantly, it's running through my head over and over again. So just by giving myself that opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to write that list and give myself that time, had a huge benefit. So I advise that to anybody. Just write a to-do list before you go to bed. It makes a big difference.
Love it, because it puts your mind at rest, because you go, okay, I know what tomorrow's going to look like now. I don't need to spend time staring at the ceiling all night thinking about it.
Exactly.
And it orders your thoughts. I know it's such a great, powerful, but very simple thing to employ. So I'd encourage everyone to do exactly that if they're not doing that already. Mate, I really enjoyed the conversation and feel like we've really only just sort of scratched the surface, but I'd really like you to just summarise for us what are the key takeaways and initial actions that aspiring and home renovators and extenders need to be taking.
Yeah, look, I suppose caution. Just step forward with caution. Just understand that these are huge sums of money involved, and some of the smallest mistakes can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. So, yeah, step forward with caution. Don't assume that people, because no one's trying to rip you off. Right. But again, just assume that inefficiencies are going to be rewarded. So again, it goes back to that control what you can control, and just step forward with caution. If don't believe every yes you get. Just sort of have a little bit of a skepticism involved with what's going, and just understand and try and interpret that person's motivations. I say our industry is not full of people trying to do the wrong thing intentionally, but inevitably the wrong thing gets done. Right. So just, step forward with caution, try and get advice, and just try and reach out to someone like myself as early as you possibly can. Now, My goal is to take this business nationally. I want to be able to have an office in every, whether that be via a franchise model or with myself driving each office. I'm not sure yet, but because it is needed. So I just think by all means reach out to myself. If there's even a bit of advice I can give you that just sets you on a track, if I can't help you hands-on personally, if I can give you one little bit of a fillet that you can take away just to step forward. But yeah, caution, that'd be the one piece of advice, is step forward cautiously. There comes a time when you have to start spending money. Everybody wants to dive in head first and go and just start throwing money at it. Not always the right way to go about it. So get a true understanding and just get an understanding of what's the true cost, what's my true process, then and only then, and incrementally start to spend as little money up front as you possibly can.
Love it. Really good advice there, mate. Look, for those in the audience that have really resonated with your message like I have today, David, how can we find out more and get more involved with you then?
Yeah, so look, I have a website, but look, the best way is to contact me via email or via phone. I'm very hands-on, so it's my business is largely driven by myself. So when you do speak to Haven Advocates, you're going to speak to me. That's just how it's going to work. So via phone, I'm happy to give my phone number and my email address now. So it's just david@havenadvocates.com.au. So david@havenadvocates.com.au. That's the best way. There is a contact form. It's like a lot of websites, it's glitchy, it goes all over the place. So I think always the safest bet, just contact me directly via email. My phone number is also on my website at havenadvocates.com.au. So by all means, just get in touch personally. As I said earlier, it costs me nothing to take your phone call. If it's just one little bit of advice I can pass over, then fantastic. That's great. You'll take something away from that conversation. So yeah, get in touch directly, as I say, via the website or ideally via email at david@havenadvocates.com.au is definitely the best way.
I love it. We'll put all those details on the show notes so we make it easy for people to do that as well.
Fantastic, David, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share, mate. I really do, because what I do is needed, and it's as I say, the goal is to take this nationally, because more and more people need to get this benefit, because every single day these mistakes are being made and a lot of money's getting thrown away. And as I said earlier, we all work too darn hard for it, mate. We've got to try and keep it in our side as much as we can.
Absolutely, mate. I think what you're doing is actually going to level the playing field for all parties in the game. In actual fact, because I think everyone's going to benefit from that. It's uncertainty and control in the wrong places always creates opportunities and issues. But mate, exactly. I'm really looking forward to keeping the conversation going. So we'll no doubt talk again to talk about other opportunities and issues as they arise down the track. But I really want to thank you for coming on board and sharing that with us today.
Fantastic, Bushy. And thanks to all your listeners. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. And don't leave yet until you've taken the next step towards living by design by getting my award-winning book, Get Invested, absolutely free when you sign up at knowhowproperty.com.au or bushymartin.com.au. And finally, make sure you subscribe to Property Hub to get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration, along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's leading property show for red-hot property investing news and insights, direct from industry leaders and influencers. Remember to always get invested in your knowledge, and I look forward to seeing you next time.